All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's How to Proactively Prevent Cybercrime for Your Practice webinar. My name is Jacob Borkover here on the webinar team at Rectangle Health, and just want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy days today to be here with us today. We've got a fantastic presentation for you here with Jeff Lanza, who's an FBI cybercrime expert, and he's going to tell you all things you need to know to make sure that you are appropriately protecting your practice from the growing threats of cybercrime here in the United States. So before we get into it here, just a few quick housekeeping items so you know who you're with and how to get your CE credits and all that. So Rectangle Health is a company that provides HIPAA, OSHA, and PCI compliance, as well as credit card integration to thousands of medical and dental practices all across the United States. So if you need any help with that, we'll be sure to get you taken care of there. And then just a few other housekeeping notes here. This is a 1-hour CE course. We are PACE accredited through the Academy of General Dentistry to provide CE for this class. So just make sure you're on for the duration of the presentation. And then also at the end of the course, we're going to be prompting you for 3 polling questions just to make sure that you're paying attention and to verify your attendance. You will be getting those CE credits via email within 2 weeks from today's presentation. So be on the lookout for that. If 2 weeks rolls by and you don't see your CE email, please check your spam or junk folder. And if not, please reach out to our team and we'll be happy to get you taken care of. If you are joining today from a mobile device and you can get to a desktop, we do recommend that for a better experience. It'll be easier to access the polling questions and you'll be able to hear and see everything a little bit better than that. After the webinar, we are going to have a brief survey prompted. It's just 4 or 5 quick questions. Just want to know how we did today and how we can continue to improve your webinar experience, as we hope you'll join us for some more webinars in the future. If you have any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can. We're also going to have a few resources for you. There's 2 handouts that Jeff has put together. Those are in the control panel on your GoToWebinar screen. If you can't find those on your right side panel there, we're also going to be emailing those out to you. So you'll be getting those. And in addition, in that email, you're also going to have a copy of the recording. So if anyone from your office would like to watch it, or if you want to catch up again on the material, you can do that. Just know if you drop off now and just wait for the recording, you're not going to get that CE credit. So make sure to stay on for the duration of the presentation. So that's my little speech. With that, I'm really excited to welcome our speaker today, Jeff Lanza. He gives a great presentation. He's an award-winning, nationally known speaker whose career as an FBI special agent has fueled his passion for helping people and organizations. Since his retirement from the FBI, he has presented in 49 states and to thousands around the globe. Jeff has lectured at Princeton and Harvard University and was voted the most popular speaker in the 55-year history of Kansas City's prestigious Plaza Club. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to send it into you. Take it away.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day. So I'm going to get right to it. I spent 20 years with the FBI, as you just heard. For most of my career, I was involved in white-collar crime. That doesn't sound just right. I investigated white-collar crime. I wasn't involved in white-collar crime, but one part of white-collar crime is cybercrime. We're going to be focusing on that today, and I'd like to talk about how we stay safe from these types of crimes, because if it happens to you, it's too late to prevent it, and then you have to deal with the aftermath of a cybercrime event, and that's never a good thing, especially for a medical practice where you have you're very busy to begin with, and you don't need that distraction. Sometimes the criminals are using more and more artificial intelligence to commit certain types of cybercrimes. We'll talk about that at the very end. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, it has been 55 years since Arthur C. Clarke predicted the use of artificial intelligence for both good and for bad. And we'll talk about how it might be used for bad at the very end of the presentation, and how you may be looking out or could look out for that type of thing as well. Of course, his computer named Hal developed self-awareness, which is probably a pretty dangerous thing for a computer to have, by the way, as it tried to eliminate mankind. Anyway, we won't go that far into depth in this topic, but we will cover artificial intelligence. This is a screenshot of a website from Prospect Medical Holdings. I use this as an example because they had a recent security breach, and you notice to the top right, there is a link to the notice of a data security incident. And if you click on that link, you will come to a page that looks like this. And of course, this is the information that they had to provide to HIPAA, or excuse me, to HHS based on HIPAA requirements. Health and Human Services requires these breaches to be reported if they're involving over 500 patients' records. And so this is in relation to that. But I wanted to point out here, this is a very recent breach, by the way, and this is a big company. Now, the location of this Prospect Medical Holdings is in Los Angeles, but they have medical subsidiaries in a variety of states, a number of states, including Rhode Island, Connecticut, where I'm from, Pennsylvania. And when the breach occurs, and you have connected and interconnected networks like they had, it's going to affect a lot of organizations. And these are just the medical facilities that it affected in Southern California as part of this major breach. Now, when a breach affects the computers in a way that it holds them hostage, we call that a ransomware attack. This is called a network intrusion, by the way, and an intrusion basically can be defined as any type of non-authorized entry into a computer system. A ransomware attack, on the other hand, isn't unauthorized entry. They may or may not exfiltrate records, but they're holding your computers hostage. This is another recent example of how that could affect a medical practice. This one comes from a place in Rhode Island. I picked these off the news very easily because there's just so many of them that are happening recently. And what happens here is not only is there a ransom that is requested or demanded to be paid by the criminals, but there's also the dealing with the money for the ransom, but also the downtime. And we're talking here about going a decade, 2, maybe 3 decades back in time, reverting to paper records. And how difficult that would be in a medical practice when you're busy enough. And not only does it put patients basically their care at risk with paper records, but also slows you down dramatically. That's what happens when a ransomware attack occurs. And we've seen numerous incidences of that type of attack recently as well. Sometimes I'm asked to talk about these events on national TV, and this is a picture of me when I was in Boston. You can see the backdrop there if you recognize the city scene or the bridge scene there in Boston. They were asking me about a ransomware attack that had occurred, and they asked me, does the FBI know who's responsible for this? And I said, well, if we knew that, we wouldn't be arresting them. I didn't actually say that. That would have been a wisecrack remark, but we don't know. But even if we did, they're probably in North Korea. They could be in Russia. They could be in China. And the point is, they're not within the reach of the FBI. And so there's no traditional law enforcement action that can take place, as they're not extradited to the United States. So there's no consequences. There's no deterrence. So the crimes continue unless we stay safe through prevention. So in this session, I want to talk about protecting your information, which is a huge target for criminals because they can take that information and sell it for a profit. We'll also talk about direct attacks on your assets, how to stay safe from that from an external and internal point of view. And then also we'll talk about how to stay safe from ransomware attacks. Back to this picture, sometimes when you're on national TV, they ask you questions that you can't answer and you have to find a way to deal with that. So one time while I was still in Kansas City, I was working as an FBI agent and I was in the studio like this, and the reporter threw out a question that I couldn't answer. She said, Agent Lanza, how do you know a meth lab when you see one? I couldn't answer that question because that's the wrong agency. See, that's the DEA, not the FBI, but I got to come up with an answer because it's live TV. Okay, here you go. How do you know a meth lab when you see one? There's your yellow lab. There's your black lab. There's your chocolate lab. And there's your meth lab right there. Now, I use this example not only for humor, but also to show you sometimes you don't always get what you expect that you're going to get. When it comes to cybercrime, there's a lot of sleights of hand out there. So we have to be careful about those. I'm going to show you some examples of that in just a minute. So let's first talk about protecting your information. And I'm going to refer back to the amount of information that you are responsible for. You have, if you want to use a horse racing term, the trifecta of information in a medical practice. You got all the P's. You got the PCI, which is credit card information. You got identifiable information, PII, which includes social security numbers in most cases of your patients. And of course, you have healthcare information as well. All of this information is protected, lots of guidelines, lots of reporting requirements if there's a breach. Big deal to protect all these, and you have to focus on protecting all three. A breach in any one of these areas will cause you major headaches and long-term consequences. Now, what do criminals do with this information? I mean, when it comes to PII, for instance, they use it they sell it online on the dark web, and they get money for that. And it can be very valuable to a criminal because it can be used to steal identities. That's the whole purpose of them attacking your businesses, your practices to get information. Now, a lot of people say, well, don't you have to as a criminal, get a fake ID if you want to steal identities? And yeah, you may have to get a fake ID, but you can open accounts and credit card accounts and bank accounts without providing an ID in person. So they use a lot of tricks to open these accounts. Now, if you were going to get a fake ID, you might want to have the common sense to take your girlfriend's picture out of the driver's license photograph. Now, maybe this is what they're referring to as a real ID, where you take real pictures taken from photo booths and put them into your driver's license photographs. This is a picture, a screenshot of the HHS website dealing with cyber breaches. This is pretty easy to find if you ever want to check it out. Go to hhs.gov and go to the breaches, and this is the information that they'll provide to you. This came from just about last week, I think is when I took this screenshot. They are putting out there breaches that occurred in the past 24 months that have been reported to HHS that have involved more than 500 people, patients' records. And that's the requirement. It has to be 500. Anything more than that, 500 or above, has to be reported. You also have to publicize that in media to let patients know that this has happened. And that's a requirement of HHS as well. So in this particular screenshot, it just shows the first page. There's 898 breaches that have been reported with over 500 people in the past 24 months. And you can narrow that down too. There's all sorts of filters you can use. And I like to play around with this a little bit. I just put in the state of California just as an example, and you can narrow it down to see how many breaches occurred of businesses, medical businesses that deal with patient records in the state of California. And the first one there is that one I just mentioned, Prospect Holdings. Lots of records there, 340,000 plus records. And that breach just occurred within the past month or so. And you can see the date of the submission of that report. You can also narrow it down by the type of attack. And I did emails because the thing about this, there's lots of entry points, right? When you're breaking into a server, it may be one or two places they can find to get into that server. But with emails, you have lots of entry points. Every employee, short cleaning staff, right, has, and they can be an issue too. We'll talk about that later. But every employee has an email account. So it's basically hundreds or thousands of people that are potential targets for the criminals trying to get access to a network. And they can do that through email accounts, through phishing emails, which I'll show you in a second. And then once they get access, they can escalate privileges where they get access to additional areas where the information is contained. So here's an example of a phishing email that might be used to deceive an employee. It looks like it's coming from Office 365. Lots of people use that service. I'm an Office 365 user myself. The victim may ignore the fact that they're spelling one word with the British spelling of that word, unrecognized, which is also used in Europe. May not notice that and click on validate, which would take you to a fake login page for Office 365. Now, if you look at the URL for that, the exact web address for that fake login page, you can tell immediately that's not Microsoft's page, it's not Office 365, but people may not notice that as they're trying to fix this problem or validate the situation, which is the ruse to get them to provide their login credentials. But if you went back to this login page, or the phishing email, you can simply hover over the link, and if you hover to discover, you will see before you even go to that fake login page, you will see the preview of that. And you can tell already that, again, that's not Microsoft's page, and you don't even have to go to the login page where you may be tempted to put in your credentials. So hovering hovering helps you predict that or reveal that before you go to that page. And notice another thing here, .ir. That's a country code. .ir refers to a foreign country. Anytime you see in a web address a dot and two letters that follow it, that is a foreign country code. And if you look that up, you can tell what country that website is in, where it's being hosted on a computer. And in this particular case, IR refers to Iran. And I doubt that Microsoft is hosting their 365 login pages in Iran. So this is a trick designed to steal your login credentials and get access to email accounts, which can be further used for fraud. And I can show you how that works in a little while as well. Also, even if they provided the link in there, you can hover over the link, even if the link looks good, right? So here it looks like a valid link because it does have the exact login credentials for Microsoft's online portal to Office 365. But you can hover again there. You can see that link is spoofed. Criminals will spoof links to try to trick us. And in doing that, they're making it more likely someone might click on that link. And hovering, again, helps reveal that that's not the site that it appears to be. So teaching employees to hover before they click on links, to never provide credentials through links like this, will keep you safe from these email account hijackings, which could lead to further fraud. If you just use a plain old Gmail account, which a lot of employees may use for personal accounts as well on a corporate computer, there's a lot of tricks there too, which give access to potentially their Gmail accounts and also for networks. If you look at this closely at the very top, this is not from a Gmail domain. It's from gmail@qmail.com. So they're hoping in this real example that the criminals are hoping that victims won't notice this. And they'll click on continue with verification because they certainly don't want to get locked out of their Gmail account. And that brings you to a fake login page for Gmail, which would result in the user getting their credentials stolen and use it to hijack their email accounts. The criminals would. Without two-factor authentication, this could be an issue. Now, you might be wondering, in many cases, you log into your email accounts on your mobile device, and you can't hover on a mobile device to see where those phishing emails are going to send you. So what you can do, and I'm going to show you an example of how this works, is by pressing and holding, that will give you the same effect as hovering. So let's take a look at this. So this is an email that I got. It looked like it was coming from PayPal. Now, PayPal is spelled incorrectly in several places here, but in case I didn't notice the misspellings, which is an indication that this is fraudulent as well, but you can't hover where it says log into PayPal, but you can press and hold. And by pressing and holding, right, that'll reveal the true site that you're going to be sent to. So you're pressing on it, you're holding it, and then you'll see on the screen, maybe even a picture of the site, depending on what phone you have. But it'll also certainly be able to show you the site that you're going to be sent to, and that is not PayPal's site. So pressing and holding reveals that. Now, if you do want to go there, if it was actually the correct site, you release your finger and then you press it again and release it, and you'll go to that site. Pressing and holding is what gives you the effect of hovering. Again, employees should be trained in hovering techniques, pressing and holding techniques to get that reveal before they go to these websites and be tempted to put in their login credentials. Now, AC, by the way, refers to a foreign country as well. And that's a weird one. It's not Russia, it's not China, it's not North Korea. It's a small island known as the Ascension Island. It's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 800 miles from land, and only about 700 people live on that island. Yet one person on that island is trying to steal my PayPal credentials with this phishing email. So cybercrime can range from large-scale attacks. Prospect Medical Holdings, 342,000 patients' information was taken or at risk. And here we just have one guy on a small island trying to get money from a PayPal account. So be careful and be vigilant about links. That's how they get you, and that's how fraud can be committed. The beginning part starts with that link in one type of fraud. Now, would you want to visit the Ascension Island? There's no place to go to stay. I mean, there's homes there, but they're not on Airbnb. There's no hotels. There's a neighboring island. And when I say neighboring, I mean about 800 miles away. There's an island called St. Helena, and they do have a hotel there that offers free Wi-Fi for guests. Would you use that free Wi-Fi for sensitive things? I can think of at least 5 reasons why that's not a good idea. Unsecured public Wi-Fi networks are not a safe place to put in your credentials or to put in any sensitive information. Make sure if you're communicating outside of a protected network, one that you're not aware of, it's an unfamiliar network on a remote island, in a coffee shop, in a restaurant, you're on vacation, you've got to have a VPN to protect the information that you're transmitting. VPNs, also known as a virtual private network, are ways to keep that information safe. You can turn off the Wi-Fi and use the cellular network of your phone or mobile device, which is much more secure than public Wi-Fi. All right, so let me sum up this first section and how we protect information. First of all, security awareness training. You don't roll your eyes at that, because you probably do that in an organization that involves medical practice. But here's the deal. Kaspersky, that big antivirus security company, came out with a study. It was about a year ago, and they said through a survey, they determined only 30% of medical practices employees had said they had received cybersecurity training within the past year. You got to do this all the time, right? You got to remind people the importance of protecting the information and money, which I'll get to very shortly. But it's not just about training. It's also about creating a culture of security in an organization. You know, culture trumps policy. It trumps procedure. You fall back to culture as a way we do business. If I met someone in your medical practice and I said to them, hey, did you hear about that Prospect Medical Holdings company's breach? And they said, oh, yeah, we saw that in the news and we saw that on the HHS site. We don't think that could happen here because we're really careful about cybersecurity. We know what not to click on. We protect our systems. We use two-factor authentication. These are the type of things you want people to say if you're asked about security. And that comes with training, talking about it all the time. Here's just an idea. Maybe at meetings that you have, besides talking about all the other stuff that you have to talk about in a regular meeting, once a week, once a month, once a quarter, bring up an example from the HHS website or one that's in the news and say, here's what happened at this organization, and here's why we're not going to let that happen here. And I know a lot of you are thinking this is IT's responsibility too, but it's a collaboration between the physicians, between the dentists that work in an organization, between the administrative staff. And if you're on this call, please pay attention to this too, because we all get together and talk about how important cybersecurity is and create that culture of security, reminding people all the time. Email filtering is a great idea to protect information. So when you get an outside email, an email that comes from an outside the organization, it should be flagged as that. We see this many times in emails that we communicate with on a regular basis. But if your organization is not using this, you're missing an opportunity to prevent people from clicking on links and attachments that might be in emails. They have to be careful about that if it is coming from outside the organization. Warn them of that, and there'll be an extra, just an extra thing they'll have to think about before they click on those links or attachments, where a lot of problems could result from those. Multi-factor authentication is an absolute 100% must. You have to use this to protect your organization. In fact, think about this. The person who has your credentials, they could be 6 miles away, they could be 6,000 miles away, but they can't log into your account, your personal account, your account at your medical practice, because the code to log in comes to a mobile device that's already predetermined. It's been set up in a system, it's been verified, and the trust is given to that mobile device to receive that code. And short of a very, very extensive way for criminals to get access to that code, they're not going to be able to get access to the account. So that second factor is really, really important. The Colonial Pipeline breach, which occurred in 2021, it locked up gasoline distribution systems on the East Coast because of a ransomware attack. They got access to a system because it did not have multi-factor authentication. When I say they, I mean the criminal. And multi-factor authentication would have prevented that ransomware attack, which resulted in a $4+ million payment to the criminals, plus having downtime of over 2 weeks or more for their very important critical systems to providing gasoline to the East Coast of the United States. MFA, really important in protecting our information, protecting our computers, and also protecting your money when it comes to bank accounts. Also, involving a culture of security, and another aspect of that is compartmentalization. right? That should be part of your culture of security. And what I mean by this is you only get access to information that you need to do your job. You compartmentalize. 20 years with the FBI, I had top secret security clearance for my entire career and additional security clearances for certain compartments that I needed to do my job. Did not have security clearance for all those compartments. There were areas that I didn't need to do my job and I couldn't go in those areas. My key card wouldn't let me in the rooms that contain that information. So keep this in mind. We compartmentalize. If someone does not have need information to do their job, they do not have access to that information. And that limits the liability or the possibility that someone, either a disgruntled employee or by mistake or a phishing email response, may involve ultimately a security breach. Compartmentalization. Not everybody gets access to everything, only what they need to do their job. Now, when you look at this particular, and the other one I wanted to mention here was that termination gap. A lot of research has shown that when people leave companies, they don't necessarily get cut off immediately from access. If you ask someone, and again, you're probably thinking this is IT and HR responsibility, but if you ask one of those people in your organization, remember it's a collaboration, you said if someone was fired today or retired today or left willingly, how long would it be before their access to computers was cut off? And that answer should be absolutely 100% zero. It should be zero time as soon as they walk out the door. And a lot of companies, it's not the case. So you have a resulting vulnerability there as people who don't need access have access to it. And if it involves people that are fired or disgruntled employees that have left the services of a company, it could be a possible, could cause you possible problems. This was a big breach that occurred. HCA, big healthcare system, they had a breach this past summer. Lots of records, lots of states involved, and it involved the hacking of a server, apparently. But I'm going to use this to illustrate a key point. We don't know the specifics beyond it. They hacked into a server, but it does illustrate a key point about who has access to various sets of information. Has to do with compartmentalization, but also another concept I want you to be aware of. It's the principle of least privilege. Now, the abbreviation for that sounds or looks almost like a medical term of something that I really don't want to have, but it is the principle of least privilege, which says basically you only get access to information you need to do your job. The minimum access, not the maximum access to everything. And it's part of compartmentalization, but it's also called POLP. Keep that in mind. That'll limit the possibility that an employee may be a weak point, a weak link in the chain where information is released. Also, I need to talk about protecting your assets from internal threats. Now, I'm going to start out that conversation by answering a question that people often ask me. They say, Jeff, when did you join the FBI? The answer's on the screen. 35 years ago, I became an FBI agent. And I became an FBI agent here in Quantico, Virginia. That's a picture of me getting my credentials. You might be wondering, wait, is that Groucho Marx joining the FBI? Is that our presenter in disguise going undercover into the FBI? I would be a horrible, horrible undercover agent, by the way. That's just not my skill set. Why don't we put it that way? Anyway, I joined the FBI because I wanted to investigate the mob. That was my thing. I wanted to investigate the mafia. And that interest came from my days growing up in Connecticut. I come from a big Italian family. There were 5 boys in my family. And every Christmas, we sat around a TV. It kind of looked like this, right? And we watched a movie every Christmas that taught me about life and loyalty and how business should be conducted. And everybody thinks it was a movie where the entertainment in our house was filled with names like, George Bailey and Mary Bailey and Mr. Potter, and they thought It's a Wonderful Life is the movie that we watched. But that's a good movie to watch on a holiday. That's not the movie that my family watched. Not this one, not these people. The movie that we watched filled my holiday entertainment with names like Vito Corleone and Luca Brasi and Johnny Fontaine. We watch The Godfather every Christmas. I know that's a weird, weird thing, but that's my family, not me. Anyway, that got me interested in the mob, investigating the mob. So when I got to Kansas City as a brand new FBI agent, I asked to work a mob case. I put up my hand and I said, "You got any mob cases I can work on?" And they go, "Yeah, we got a mob case going on right now." It involves a wiretap on a mobster's phone. You can go sit on the wire if you want. So I go in this room, I put on the headphones, and I'm listening to a phone of a guy named Tony. Now, there's a lesson here. So pay attention to what happens next. As the FBI listens, Tony gets a call from Joe. Tony says, Joe, I'm really glad you called. And Joe goes, yeah, why? And Tony goes, I got a little problem. I think the FBI is tapping my phone. And Joe goes, well, what are you going to do about it? And Tony goes, well, I got a new number. So here we go. Lacking any common sense, Joe goes, okay, good. Give me the number. Now, Tony gets a little common sense and he says, well, I better not give it to you on the phone. I'll meet you for lunch and give it to you then. And Joe says, well, I can't meet you for lunch. And Tony says, okay, I'll give it to you now on the phone, but I'll give it to you backwards. So he proceeded to give him these 7 digits in reverse order. What did the FBI do? We got our best cryptologist on that one right away. We had the number figured out in record time. It just took us 6 months with the powerful computers we had back in 1988. But you know, I use this example. It's a true story, not the 6-month part, but about the phone call, because it illustrates a really key point. How critical is common sense in everyday life? When it comes to preventing fraud, it's important too, because what criminals try to do is manipulate our thinking so we're not using common sense. They want us to use emotions to make decisions. And when we do that, we might be more easily tricked. You already saw it in the emails. Validate your account. You're going to get locked out of this account if you don't click on this link. So let me show you some more examples. And I'm going to, before I even go into that, I want to show you one thing that seems to be an issue in this country with medical professionals. In fact, I got a call from a doctor who was victimized by this. This is a person, a professional who went to a very, very top tier medical school, but yet she was victimized to the tune of 6 figures based on a scam where she got a phone call indicating that her medical license was at risk for whatever reason they told her it was at risk for. Then there's a variety of different ways they try to trick you. Anyway, please keep in mind that if there's an investigation of a medical professional that involves you losing your license, or that professional losing their license, the DEA, the FBI, or whatever organization at a federal level is going to come out and show you their credentials. They're going to talk to you in person. This is a picture of my credentials taken a few years before I retired. And they're going to flip those at you and say, FBI, we need to talk to you. And that's what you're going to see. You're not going to get a phone call from someone that says there's an investigation going on. Here's what you have to do next. And that usually involves sending them money. So they're trying to get your license. Now, the only medical license I can really find online that I wanted to put on the screen, just to make an example here, was that of Ken Carson, Ken of Barbie and Ken fame. I didn't know he was a doctor, but I guess there was a Ken doctor here. But anyway, if anyone calls you and says your medical license is at risk, you have to do this, and don't believe him, number one. And if it involves money, it is absolutely 100% a scam. You always ask people to come out, meet you, show you their official credentials before proceeding with anything they're telling you to do. Now I want to get back into the cyber fraud type of scams here. And this is an example of a small business that was victimized. Hackers had sent them a malicious email, and it was opened by an employee. They clicked on the attachment. Let me show you what this email may have looked like. All right, so again, emotion, you missed a package. You weren't expecting a package? Why would you click on the link? But isn't everyone always expecting a package nowadays? All right, but still, if you think this is happening, you can go to the USPS website or UPS website or DHL website and track the package with the tracking number. You're not going to click on this link that's going to install malware on your computer, and that could lead to a particular type of malware which is designed to steal bank login credentials. And if that happens, then basically they can get access to a bank account. So that's what happened here in this particular business. It wasn't a medical practice, but I use it as an example because it shows how much money the criminals can have access to. They transferred 440 grand to Cyprus, which has the lowest money laundering standards in the country in terms of reporting requirements, in the world, I should say. And so that allowed the criminals to get the money in there easily and then transfer it to other countries. That's probably why it went there. So a lot of businesses think, medical practice or otherwise, especially if you're a small practice, keep this in mind. Hey, I'm protected, you may be thinking. I'm protected from this because the bank is going to refund my money if this happens to me. Well, read the fine print. For a bank account that has been opened with a tax ID number, not a social security number, which is an individual bank account, you open with a tax ID number as a business, your corporate number, that is not protected. In fact, you have 24 hours to report fraud. And in the case of where you're making mistakes like this, you may have no time to report it. You're not going to get your money back. So you need to be careful about these type of links that may get access to bank login credentials, and money could be transferred. We'll tell you some solutions to that in just a second. Business email compromise, extremely profitable crime for the criminals. This comes from the FBI crime report for 2022, which comes out in March. Came out in March this year, and every year it does. We see lots of money being lost through business email compromise. So let's look at how that may occur. Here's an example of a fake invoice, or an invoice that was based on real work done, but they're changing the bank account. We have changed bank accounts. Now, here's where common sense comes in. Tony and Joe, remember? Common sense. How many times do businesses change bank accounts? And how many times do they change bank accounts right where you're getting ready to pay them an invoice? But people have complied with these requests and sent money to the criminal's bank account because they've intercepted the communication based on a hijacked email account, and money is out the door. This can happen in a medical practice as well. This is not an example of that. This is an example of something that happened in Ozark area of Missouri. If you ever watched the show Ozark, I do not like it. It's too dark for me. I think Jason Bateman, the star of that show, should be in comedies, not dark shows like Ozark. So I never got into that show. So it's about meth dealing in the middle of Missouri, or southern Missouri anyway. Now, some of that goes on, true, but what's going on here is we have a technical community college wiring $900,000 as a result of the scheme I just showed you, right? Impersonating vendors. Again, does it make sense, right, that a bank account was changed just when you're getting ready to write a $900,000 check? They sent the money to the victims, to the criminal's bank account, and it was irrecoverable by the time they figured this out. Business email compromise usually results when an email account is hijacked. A couple more examples of that just to show you how this works. This involves $17.2 million being sent that way to China. And I want to show you the specifics of this. Besides hijacking email accounts, they can also duplicate domain names with just small changes, like instead of .com, it's .com, .co. So you can set this up just duplicating the names of the players involved to try to trick people. This is a real example of a wire transfer that cost about $800,000 to the victim company. And here's one. In this example, they just switched around the letters. Notice how the spelling of this name in the logo, and then notice the spelling of the name in the email. They switched it around, set up a domain name and an email address that looked exactly the same, registered that on GoDaddy or something like that, sent the email, and the money was sent. So that's how they do it, besides hijacking email accounts. Lots of money's been lost this way. So to protect your assets, always use two-factor authentication for financial accounts and email accounts. Those protect those from these different scams that I just mentioned. You've got to use two-factor authentication, right? And in the case of email accounts that are being the lookalike email accounts that I showed you, using email filters will ensure, the IT people set these up, it will ensure that those emails won't even reach the intended recipient. If the letters are switched around, it's going to recognize that as being an external email. It's not from inside the company, and it'll be flagged as such or be filtered out entirely. And how about picking up the phone? Pick up the phone before you wire money. This should be standard procedure, especially when something changes regarding that wiring of money. All right, let's also talk about internal threats. I bring this up because I've seen it happen so many times. So when I worked for the FBI, I was also investigating computer crime, but also embezzlements. I got called to the scene of a dentist office, a one-man operation in Kansas City. And you never know when you get into these places what you're going to see. But we heard there was an embezzlement. It was reported to the FBI. I went over there to investigate, and it turned out this one-man operation was victimized to the tune of very, very high six figures because the employee told them that they were using QuickBooks, and the dentist didn't want to deal with QuickBooks, and he didn't want to learn QuickBooks, and he let the employee do everything. And that resulted in lots of money being lost. So that was a case that was prosecuted federally, but it was after much money had been taken and very little of that was recovered. I used this example in my last presentation when I did this event back in May of last year, 2022, and I just want to reinforce the point here. It doesn't matter how much you trust employees. It doesn't matter how fabulous they are. I have heard this many times. She was the most trusted employee. I can't believe it. She babysat for my kids when they were young. We've had her for years and years. I never would have thought she'd embezzle money from me, or he could do the same exact thing. That's what we're seeing, because it's the trust factor that creates the opportunity. So how do we stay safe from people that are trying to take money from us in ways I've just described? This is an example. I just want to point out this one too. Look at the dates on this. This is in Boston. So the embezzlement occurred between, for about 5-year period, about 348,000 was taken and then terminated in 2015 and then prosecuted many years later. And by that time, the money's going to be irrecoverable. She got time in prison, but that doesn't really help you if you've been victimized by this. All right, so generally we find out much later, prosecution occurs much later, and money is long spent by the time we find out about it. So how do you stay safe from people that may steal from you internally? Well, number one, you don't want a police state in your organization, but always verify transactions. You don't have to be an expert in QuickBooks, but you should sit down and look at what's going in and what's going out on a semi-regular basis. If you're giving too much control to one or more people in an organization, it should be checked. Separate duties. Do never let the same person pay bills and reconciling checking accounts in the same business. You may not have that option. Maybe it's a small operation. You're a one-man shop or a one-woman shop, and you have one person doing this. Maybe you've outsourced it to an accountant. You need to double check. Always verify. Don't have to do a full-scale audit, but if you're doing an audit, you're sitting down in the afternoon and you're saying, hey, I just want to check what went out the last couple of weeks and what's coming in. Do it on a surprise basis, because people can prepare for audits. In the banking business, it's required by the FDIC, or highly suggested, that employees have to take time off, right? We found that employees that never take a sick day, never take time off, they're hard workers, they're great employees, but they're using that as a way to cover their tracks. If someone did their job in between while they went on vacation or while they were off sick, they would discover the embezzlement. So make sure people take time off and have others do the job that they're doing. If you can verify that. Even people who clean can be steal information, maybe not money, because you're certainly going to have that locked up, but information should be locked up too, because in this case, it was used in a Chicago hospital to commit identity theft with lots of bad results from that. All right, the last part of my presentation, I want to talk about ransomware. MGM, the big hotel casino chain, was subject to a ransomware attack recently. I don't know if you've heard about this. In fact, if you went to a betting kiosk in one of the casinos and tried to bet on a sporting event, you couldn't do it. Ask me how I know that. Anyway, they're using a crying emoji to experience, or to represent to people why that you can't bet on games, because we've been down because of a ransomware attack. Seriously? I actually think they should use the crying emoji. Have you seen this one on your phone? It has the two like rivers of tears pouring down the emoji's face, because it's going to cost them about $100 million to get back up and running. At least that's what the Wall Street Journal says. They didn't pay the ransom. On the other hand, Caesars, also subject to a ransomware attack, right about the same time. This was so amazing about this. They got information and they shut their computers down, and Caesar said, all right, we're just going to pay. So they paid half the requested ransom. Demand was 30 million. They paid 15 million. They got their encryption keys. Still, lots of damage was caused, but it's not costing them as much as MGM to recover from this attack. So see how serious ransomware attacks can occur? And remember, not to use the gambling term again, but you have the trifecta of information. much more than Caesars or MGM would have. They're going after that. That's valuable to them, and it could result in high ransom demands as well as excessive downtime and patients being put at risk. So how's Caesars covering this $15 million that they're paying? I think what they're doing it this way. If you go into a Caesars, if you went in a few weeks ago before this happened and you hit the jackpot a payment, a royal flush on a video poker machine, you got 200 grand. They've lowered that after the ransomware attack because they got to make up that $1 million. They've lowered it down to $2. Yeah. I hope you think that's funny because I spent a lot of time making this slide look the way it is. Anyway, how does the attack occur? Well, you may get an email. Again, Office 365, a lot of users of that. Oh, those macros have been disabled. Let's enable the content here. People may fall for that, and that downloads the malware from a remote host. That's one way it could occur. Here's kind of a tricky one. Now take a look at this. I found this to be very interesting. So if you wanted to send an email to someone and you wanted to send sensitive information in this payment document, maybe it had a routing number, an account number in it, and you want to encrypt the document with a password. Now you can do that. That's a great way to protect it, but you wouldn't put the password in the document, in the email, because that's going to allow anybody to getting this email to open up that document. So this wouldn't be the way you would do it. None of this makes sense, but they're doing it this way because they're trying to evade the antivirus software, which may catch malware embedded in or at least a link embedded in a Microsoft Word document when they click enable content. It could be stopped by the perimeter security software, but the perimeter security software can't open the document because it's protected with a password. That document may make its way to the end user who opens it, puts the password in, and gets affected by a potentially ransomware attack. There it is. And then the encryption occurs if you try to open up a folder, you'd see something like this, and you need to get basically the encryption key, which would help you to decrypt those. They'll decrypt some for you. So and basically send you documents will show you how to pay the ransom, which looks something like this. And you don't have to basically understand asymmetric or cryptographic algorithms, right? You don't have time for that. You're just trying to get your computers up and running, right? You're trying to get patients being served again without using paper. Isn't it nice? They give us an option. We can pay an encryption and cost, a fee for each system that's been encrypted. That could be hundreds or thousands across a major medical practice, or we can get a volume discount and just pay one amount and get all the keys to decrypt all the files on all the computers. Aren't they nice? They give you that volume discount. They say please, they say thank you. They'll give you your encryption key, most likely because they want to keep doing it to people. There's no guarantees that you're going to get the encryption key, but you most likely will get it. And then, of course, customer satisfaction is such a big thing. This is a business for them, and they want satisfied customers. You're going to get a follow-up and just to see how your hacking experience was. You know, it's almost gotten to this point with ransomware attacks. So a couple of things here to stay safe from ransomware attacks. Same thing we talked about earlier, all right? Those two things apply. But thirdly, and this applies for all types of cybercrime too, remember, it's a collaboration. I know you're not IT people on this for the most part, but still, we want to make sure that we're collaborating and telling people or talking to people about these issues, that we're keeping things up to date to keep you safe against the latest threats. Air gap is a term that's used to describe a technical method where information is taken off a system and protected immutably. It's immutable from being written over or affected with malware, and it can be recovered from. IT people should know what this means. You should talk to them and say, do we have an immutable or air-gapped backup copy that we can recover from? The answer is yes, and it probably won't be. The answer is yes, that's great. If it's no, then how do we recover in the event of a ransomware attack? Recovery plans are important as well. Step-by-step recovery plans, and actually HHS requires that you have a recovery plan in the event of ransomware attacks. Test the backup. Backups are not always what they think they are. You might have experienced that in your personal computing life. So you don't want anybody to say, yeah, we recovered from the backup, but it turns out that the patient information, these new patients that we got between August 2022 and August 2023, somehow that wasn't included in the backup. Test the backup. Make sure you can recover from that. Shut down the systems in the event of a ransomware attack so you can limit the damage. One particular hospital in the District of Columbia set up a code system. Now you have lots of codes in hospitals. They have code blue, they have code red, they have code pink. Code dark is a code for this hospital. Shut down your computers. They keep it in their name tags. And if we ever call a code dark, shut off your computer, disconnect from the web, because we'll limit the possibility that ransomware would hit your computer. And in a big hospital or medical practice network, this is crucial in limiting the damage. Think about that as a possible method to limit those attacks. Never be in denial. Those of you that are in denial will be affected by computer attacks. So make sure you're not in denial. Always think this could happen to us, and what are we going to do to prevent it from happening? Right? This guy was in denial, picked up a snake. It's not going to bite me. Don't worry about that. It's always guys that pick up snakes, right? Not girls. Guys pick them up. The two most common things that a guy says before they pick up a snake are these: take my picture, hold my beer. And they're invariably bit by the snake. It takes a while for this to happen, but it does happen fairly quickly. I showed this at a recent event, this picture, and a lady came up to me afterwards. She goes, and I called it a rattlesnake. She goes, Jeff, by the way, that wasn't a rattlesnake. I go, oh. She goes, that was a cottonmouth. And I go, all right, I'm not a snake expert. Excuse me. I didn't think I was going to get called on it. But same point, it is a venomous snake as well. Remember, don't be in denial. The speed at which these attacks can occur are very quick. So make sure we have training and recovery procedures and possible prevention procedures with codes, as I mentioned. Lastly, I want to talk about, we're going to get to the polling questions in just a second. One more thing that's important: contact the FBI. They're not going to help you get your computers back up. They'll show up in their blue jackets with yellow, big FBI yellow letters on the back, right? But you don't want that to happen. You don't want them taking computers away. It's a distraction and to your business and to serving patients, but they should be contacted so they can at least figure out who's behind the attack and maybe try to help you get money back, although that's not their prime goal, but you should contact them. Finally, I mentioned I would come back to this topic of human and artificial intelligence. Now, I think artificial intelligence is actually smarter than humans. And why I say that, there's a lot of terms that have to go with AI. And the reason why I say computers are smarter than people, well, we know, first of all, that they're faster than people, much, much faster. They don't get tired. So that's two big benefits of using computers to do things. But, the reason why I think they're smarter already is because the 23andMe breach was not caused by 23andMe being breached. It was caused by customers reusing passwords. Not a very smart thing to do, right? These are the passwords that are known to the criminals. They're most commonly used by people for various accounts. There was breaches in many accounts. They used the same passwords for 23andMe, and that's how criminals got in, using these weak, mostly used passwords. Always use passphrases in your personal life and in your corporate life as well. Passphrases are better because they're going to be unique for each system. You're not reusing passphrases. They protect against brute force attacks because they're super strong. They can't be tracked. They protect against credential stuffing, where they take a password from one place, put it in another, like you just saw with 23andMe. Also keep you safe that way. Use passphrases, and I'll give you an example. You get a 2-for-1 special. You want to use passphrases because they benefit you in 2 different ways at least. So here's my passphrase for 23andMe. That's not their landing page. I got that myself because I didn't want to use their real landing page. You like the double helix there? Anyway, I like this one for 23andMe. Only use it for 23andMe. They're finding a lot of criminals, cold cases are being solved by people who use 23andMe, and they find these cousins and stuff that have been involved in crimes based on DNA that was at a crime scene that they haven't had anything to compare to, but now they do. I like this one as well. And this one is a passphrase that has to do with my favorite streaming service. I remembered that my family would watch The Godfather every Christmas. And so we had to take a break to celebrate Christmas. So we took a break when we heard a phrase in the movie. The phrase we were listening for was this one: leave the gun, take the cannoli. So I'm going to use that phrase for my favorite streaming service, because when we heard that phrase in the movie, we stopped the movie, got out a box of cannoli, and celebrated Christmas in my family. Yeah, that's a weird tradition, but that's my family, not me. Anyway, I'm going to use that as my favorite passphrase, or my passphrase for my streaming service that I like the best. Taking the cannoli, also taking out the spaces. It's super strong against credential stuffing and against brute force hacking. You can be protected too with passphrases, but don't use this one. It's already taken. All right, don't store passphrases in your contact list. They're vulnerable to being used by other apps. Plus, they're associating with known criminals. Use a passphrase manager to store your passphrases. You'll see some listed on my handout. You can also store passphrases in a note. And these are just some examples ways you might do that. Go ahead and instead of clicking on done, when you put passphrases in a note, click on the little circle, click on the lock, assign a passphrase to the note, a password or phrase to the note. No one can get access to that. Just another way to store passphrases. And before we go to the polling questions, Jacob, we'll be right back to that in a second. Criminals are using artificial intelligence to commit fraud. The large language manual is being used in a very conversational term to come up with emails based on people's past emails that they've had access to and to craft things that may look more real. In this particular example, we're seeing potential access to a corporate network. Here at the very top, someone typed in this term into a chat AI box and got this email after the artificial intelligence program scoured basically corporate annual reports for this person's letters. They figured out exactly how this person writes and used that type of writing style to try to trick an employee to wire money. This is not a real example, but it's based on something that could happen. And then finally, I'm just going to return to this book. When we get artificial intelligence that has self-awareness, that's when we have a problem. And in the book and the movie, Dave was locked out. The astronaut was locked out in outer space. He asked the computer how to open the pod bay doors, and Hal said, "I can't do that, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that." Now, can't is one thing, but not wanting to do it is another thing. And if I say to Alexa, Alexa, set the timer for 30 minutes, right? I'm going to check on my cake. I'm going to take it out in 30 minutes. I'm going to frost it after the cake is cooled, of course, with my spatula. And if Alexa says, "I'm sorry, Jeff, I don't want to do that," I'm going to put down that spatula and take out a sledgehammer to that thing, because that's when it's become self-aware, and that's a bad thing. Jacob, I'm going to go to you now for the polling questions.
All right, sounds good. I'm looking over here at my my Alexa, Jeff. You set it off a little bit, so it's flashing right now, a little bit confused. So hopefully it doesn't start talking during this. But let's go to the polling questions here. Everyone's down for a few more quick minutes so that we can get verified that you're here. The best way to determine where a hyperlink will lead you to is click and see what happens, hover over the link to see a preview, paste the link into Wikipedia, or reverse engineer the link. All right, so we'll give everyone about 20 seconds here for each of these to get in your answers. All right, looks like we had 3% say click and see what happens. 92% said hover over the link to see a preview. 1% paste the link into Wikipedia, and 3% reverse engineer the link.
Okay, so B is the correct answer, hover.
All right. Polling number 2, a network intrusion refers to any unauthorized activity on a digital network, denial of service attacks, phishing emails designed to steal bank login credentials, and spoofing of corporate email accounts. All right, looks like we had 80% say any unauthorized activity on a digital network, 6% say denial of service attacks, 10% phishing emails designed to steal bank login credentials, and 5% spoofing of corporate email accounts.
Okay, A is the correct answer, although there's a little trick in there because denial of service attacks could be considered an intrusion as well, but not specifically, not exactly. But A is the correct answer there.
All right, and last polling question here. Which of the following are true regarding ransomware attacks? They are used to extort money from victims. If you pay ransom, getting back files is not guaranteed. Most attacks result from clicking email attachments. or D, all of the above? All right. Looks like 4% said A, 1% B, 1% C, and then 93% all the above. So great work, everyone. Glad to see everyone is paying attention and got something out of the presentation. Perfect. All right, so with that, a few more quick things before we sign off here. With that, the CE is officially over. Just want to let everyone know, with the information provided today, if for whatever reason you feel that your practice does not have the appropriate cybersecurity measures in place, you don't know what to do with HIPAA, you don't know what to do in the event of a ransomware or cyber attack, we're here to help you. So I've put a link in the chat to request a demo of our HIPAA and cybersecurity compliance product specifically designed for medical and dental practices. So if you are interested in that, please go through and click that demo button and we will have our team reach out to you and get you squared away with learning more about that. A few more quick housekeeping items here. We are going to be sending CE that will be coming your way within the next 2 weeks, so be on the lookout on your email for that. You will get a follow-up email within the next 24 hours. That's going to contain a link to this recording. It's going to contain the handouts from the presentation today as well. So be on the lookout for that, and then you'll be able to catch up on anything you may have missed or review anything from the presentation here today. If you have any additional questions for us, webinar@rectanglehealth.com. You can shoot us an email. And just really want to thank all of you for being here again today. And thank you, Jeff. As always, fantastic presentation, seeing a lot of great feedback here in the comments. So thank you for being with us today. Everyone, make sure you fill out that survey on your way out. And with that, have a wonderful and fantastic rest of your Thursday. Take care.
Thank you.